Hey, what's up, buddy? Welcome back to News Dose, and it's always fun to open the week with good news. And I actually do have some really good news for all of the big three this time, being Xbox, PlayStation, and Nintendo. Xbox did tease a major game the fans have been asking about for really years now. Not only did they tease it, but actually one outlet essentially confirmed it themselves. So we're going to get into all of that, as well as an upcoming PlayStation showcase, and also a surprising Switch 2 title that could potentially be on the way relatively soon. First, though, I do want to thank my supporters on Patreon and on YouTube memberships. Thank you just so much for what you do, and you will receive this video through early access. Let's go get right into things, though, starting off with the PlayStation Portal. Now, I have defended this thing multiple times because I genuinely do enjoy it. No, it's not better than running games natively. There's no doubt about that, but I think it works surprisingly very good now that they've updated it to fix things like micro-stuttering, which was my initial issue with it. But that right there is what I want to talk about, because Sony has poured a lot of effort into its post-release. And if you know anything about Sony, they don't really do that when a product is struggling. If you look back at the PlayStation Vita or even the PlayStation VR 2, they moved on from those products relatively fast because they weren't exactly pumping a lot of money out for them. But the Portal, it keeps receiving new updates, and that's for a good reason. The Portal continues to exceed Sony's expectations, and while talking with Tech Radar, they said before we launched the Portal, some questioned whether there would be a demand for it, as it is such a unique product, being a dedicated remote play device to start off with. However, we've seen the community's response has been overwhelming. Our data shows that PlayStation Portal users are more engaged than non-users. The PlayStation Portal has now become the most widely used device for PlayStation 5 remote play, surpassing mobile, PC, PlayStation 5, and PlayStation 4. And that's actually very important information, because for years, there's been this idea that mobile is the next big thing for console gaming. With the addition of cloud, there's this idea that it's going to boost console games to the next level. But the truth is that the data has yet to show any real results. Yet here, a dedicated remote play device built by Sony has already surpassed what they've achieved in mobile. And what that tells me is that gamers still haven't embraced console games on mobile phones. And that's probably for various different reasons. And I can only speak for myself here, but from my perspective, the thing that bothers me the most about gaming on a mobile phone, because I have done the whole remote play thing on phones, I've done cloud gaming on phones, is that it's cumbersome. You have to have a separate controller, and then you also have to attach it and then detach it when you're done, and it just doesn't feel very good. Whereas something like the Portal, it's a turn-on and play device with also a sizable screen for that matter, which makes a massive difference for console games that were initially built in mind to play on a bigger screen. So with all of that, I can easily see why gamers are choosing the Portal over their phones, because I've done the same thing. Now, however, the other thing that this highlights is why we're also hearing rumors about a new dedicated PlayStation handheld. I think because the Portal has been so successful for Sony, it has given them this newfound confidence in handhelds, and I think they now completely understand that if they have a handheld that also can play games natively, then they can have even more success. So I think it's only a matter of time before we officially hear about that handheld from Sony specifically. Now, speaking of handhelds, though, let's go and talk about a surprising game that could soon be ported over to the Switch 2, being Silent Hill F. Now, as a bit of a warning here, there is still some uncertainty to this news. But what's happening is that on Konami's website, they have Silent Hill F listed for the Nintendo Switch, which I assume they mean the Switch 2, then the Xbox One, and the PlayStation 4. Now, there is a chance that this could simply be an error, so we can't ignore that. But if true, then a Switch port as well as a port for last generation consoles could soon be on the way. Now, I'll be honest here, I'm not convinced by this listing just yet, but at the same time, I think this could be possible. I think right now there are still a lot of gamers that are kind of used to these type of games skipping out on Nintendo consoles because, Nintendo hardware historically just hasn't been powerful enough for a lot of these AAA games. But the Switch 2, I think, is going to surprise a lot of people this generation. I mean, really any game that can be scaled down to run on the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4 theoretically should also run on the Switch 2. And, even in the year of 2025, we have seen time and time again a lot of these modern AAA games, they can still run on those last generation consoles. And that's because they're still plenty capable. So the Switch 2 being as popular as it is, yeah, developers are going to want to target it when they can. So we'll see what happens with all this, but if we get a more official update, of course, I'll let you know. Oh, and Arc Raiders hit another milestone this past weekend. Obviously, word of mouth has been very strong, to say the least, and the data shows that. Not only did it reach a new peak high on Steam with 462,000 concurrent players, but with the combination of consoles as well, it's now reached a staggering 700,000 concurrent players across all platforms, which is pretty incredible for a brand new IP. So it goes without saying that this has been a very successful game, and it'll be interesting to see if it can continue to climb. I mean, the word of mouth is just so strong for this game right now. Its Steam user reviews still sits at a 90% approval rate, and even critics seem to adore this game. It currently has an 84 overall score with really only a few negative reviews that are dragging it down, so, the vast majority does seem to enjoy Arc Raiders, and as long as word of mouth stays strong like it has been, then more people will continue to discover it in the coming weeks and potentially even in the coming months as well. I want to hear from you all, though. Have you been playing this game? And if you have you been enjoying it? All right, now let's go and talk about Xbox, or more specifically Bethesda. In a new interview, Todd Howard had a lot of things to say about their upcoming pipeline of games, and there were two things that he mentioned that I think fans are going to go ballistic about. Now, the first of which, not everybody is going to necessarily be thrilled about, but he gave an update for The Elder Scrolls 6. I mean, they announced this game years ago. I want to say 7 years ago. Correct me if I'm wrong about that. And personally, for me, this is the Bethesda franchise that I gravitate towards. I do prefer the Elder Scrolls over Fallout and Starfield. Those are still great franchises, but I do prefer me some Elder Scrolls. And as sad as it is to say, we are still going to have to wait for seemingly a long time. In an interview with GQ, he said that it's still a long way off. I'm preaching patience. I don't want fans to feel anxious. I like to just announce stuff and release it. My perfect version, and I'm not saying that this is going to happen, is that it's going to be a while and then one day the game will just appear. So this tells me that it's at bare minimum, probably still a few years off. I mean, it very well could potentially be a next generation title by this point, which I can see how that could be upsetting for a lot of people, but for me personally, I'm okay with that. Bethesda games have this knack for having a very long life cycle. If you go back and look at games like Skyrim and Fallout 4 as two such examples, they still have sizable communities even to this day. So truthfully, I just want them to make The Elder Scrolls 6 as good as they possibly can. That way, it can be another evergreen title for fans to play for years and years and years. Now, the other big news, though, is that he teased something Fallout-related in the same exact interview, because he mentioned that hundreds of people are on Fallout right now, with 76, and interestingly, some other things we're doing. So he essentially confirmed that they are working on multiple Fallout projects, which, I mean, shouldn't come as a major surprise. There's really been rumors about this since at least last year, and it kind of dates back even before that. The Amazon series was a massive success for them, and immediately after, we started to hear about how Microsoft wanted to fast-track Fallout to capitalize on its recent success, which is a very smart thing for them to do. Well, there's two specific Fallout projects that's been widely rumored. One is for a Fallout New Vegas sequel, which fans are going to go crazy if that's true, but who knows if it is. We've also heard a lot about Fallout 4, but that's still potentially years and years away, though we have kind of heard that it could be sooner than expected. But then the other project that we've continuously heard about is the Fallout 3 remaster. In fact, that game even appeared within their leaked FTC documents. So there's already some evidence that they have at the very least considered a Fallout 3 remaster. And well, today, the Video Games Chronicle said that one of the projects that he teased in this interview, or at least from what their sources tell them, is in fact a Fallout 3 remaster. And I think that would be pretty amazing. For one, arguably, Fallout 3 is among the best Fallout games, depending on who you ask, and it also just kind of makes sense. Of course, they remastered Oblivion just earlier this year, and I mean, Fallout 3 is their other game from that same era, being the Xbox 360 PS3 days. So a remaster just makes a lot of sense with everything that they've been doing. But my only thing is that if Oblivion is a precursor of what's to come next, then I just want to say release it when it's ready. I mean, Oblivion Remastered is good in a lot of ways, but even to this day, it still has some glaring performance issues that just shouldn't be there, and I just hope they don't do the same thing to Fallout 3 Remastered, because these games deserve the absolute best. Either which way, though, it might not be that much longer before we get some official news from Bethesda themselves. Now, one last thing before we go, though, because Sony just announced a new PlayStation State of Play, which will air tomorrow on November 11th. But interestingly, this one will strictly focus on Asian games. So don't expect any kind of Western titles, which, I mean, depending who you ask, that might be a good thing because, these past couple of years, Asian games have been, better. So I'm excited to see what they could potentially have in store here. This will be a 40-minute showcase, so I mean, they should have a lot there, but at the same time, as I always like to stress when it comes to these State of Play events, they're not PlayStation showcases, and that's very important to understand. Now, the reason I say that is because their State of Plays tends to be smaller in scope. So it's important to go in with the right expectations. Don't go in expecting massive announcement after massive announcement, because that probably won't happen. However, that doesn't mean that it won't be a fun time, because we could still get an update for games like Resident Evil 9, Pragmata, Dragon Quest VII Reimagined, and even Marvel Tokon. That game is planned, I believe, for 2026, so they could start to ramp up its marketing sometime soon, and potentially even tomorrow. Now, they could have a few surprises in store, which could even include some Chinese games. They have put a lot of resources into that region, and their announcements did specifically mention Asia rather than just Japan. In the meantime, though, let me hear what you would most like to see come tomorrow at the PlayStation State of Play. Anyways, though, that's going to be it for this episode, but until next time, make sure to subscribe, ring that bell, and peace out.